Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, we're working on our series called View from the Box, where we're looking at the nature of a Zettelkasten from the point of view of the physical objects that compose it. We already looked at the bib box and all the bib cards, and now we're looking at the main box and main cards. Last video, we looked at a large number of different possible main cards types that you might have in your box. And this time, we're answering a question. How do you figure out where a new card goes in your Zettelkasten? And how do you give it a number? Those are pretty important questions. So come on over to the down-facing camera and we'll tackle this question. Then, stay to the end and I will show you how the numbering system that I prefer is actually the same as the numbering system that Scott Shepherd prefers. They look a lot different, but when you dig under the hood, you'll see that they're actually the same. So come on over to the down-facing camera and let's get started. Okay, here's the first card that we looked at last video. This is a card that reflects an idea. The idea came from Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book. And in fact, it was his prescription for active reading, and it includes a quote. Ask questions while you read, questions that you yourself must try to answer in the course of reading. And there's my response. The less verbal mind loves questions. They are like candy to the associative brain. And here's my tagline. Questions keep both sides of the brain reading. Now, where is this going to go in my Zettelkasten? We'll see the mechanism for this when we cover the index box. But right now, I'm going to talk to you about the idea behind how we place a card. In this case, if you notice that several of these words in the tagline are underlined, that means that we will be looking for possible associations for this card based on these key words. Not always, but a lot of the time, it'll be these key words that will signal where we want to place the card. While we're looking for where the card goes, the card doesn't actually have a number yet. This card ended up going with this card that's been in my system a very long time. I have a gajillion cards from the Zettelkasten book, in the Intellectual Life. It was one of the first books that I read with a bib card, and I created a ton of main cards. I love them, and I love bumping into them, but I bump into them rather often because of the huge number of them that I created. And having so many, I help let them fly through my system as widely as possible to scatter the knowledge around. Well, now, this card that my new card seemed to go best with was also about reading. We read great books to gain wisdom, not the acquisition of scattered truths. So it was most likely read and reading that tied these two cards together. Now, once this card knew that it wanted to go with this card, actually numbering the card was automatic. And let's see if I can demonstrate for you how the numbering comes about, because it's so easy that you're not going to quite believe how easy it actually is. First of all, notice that the new card starts with the old card's number. The new card's number is always an extension of the existing card. It's a letter, in this case C. Where did that come from? Well, in my numbering system, we always go from a number to a letter, and we go from a letter to a number. And then when we've had a letter, a number, a letter, a number, a letter, then I throw in a dash just for readability. Kind of like with your credit card, where they group your credit card numbers in groups of 4. But why did it get a C? Why wasn't it just an A? The answer to that question comes in a type of card that we saw yesterday called the directory card. You see, 1G4B-2 has a directory card whose tagline matches the tagline of the existing card. Well, this card is so old it didn't have a tagline, but we sort of pulled one out of the text. Read great books to gain wisdom. I think that's a pretty decent tagline from this card. Now, at the time we were placing this card already had a card that was numbered with 2A and one that was numbered 2B. So it had to become number 2C. What we logged on the directory card is the tagline from each of the cards that choose this card as the one they want to go with. So part of the job of placing this card with this card is its tagline had to be listed also on the directory card. Notice that they're the same. So that's how this card got its number and how it knew where it wanted to go. Let's look at another example from yesterday. Okay, now let's take our next example. This was an example of using a quote. This one is from a Vanessa Sperling quote. A Zettelkasten is not a parking lot, it's a vehicle. I love that metaphor because it reminds me of the concept of going someplace with the cards that we have in our Zettelkasten. And I made a remark based on my feelings at the time that I created this card, which is that categories encourage parking cards in their proper spaces, where joining interesting conversations moves the concept along. So I like that idea of motion going into effect. And so my tagline for this card to bring the whole card back was, a Zettelkasten is a vehicle that moves thoughts, not parks them. So where did this card get its number? As always, it gets its number from the card that it wants to be associated with. So what card did this one pick to be associated with? Well, here's the card that it chose. It was an observation that a Zettelkasten you can have one of those sudden pop off the page moments of discovery when you're working with your cards and a fantastic insight just jumps out at you as though it came out in 3D off the surface of the card and into your mind. Well, clearly it was the Zettelkasten present in both that probably caused the two to first be considered to whether or not they belong together. And I think another part that made this card want to be associated with this one is the concept of movement. Here we have moving thoughts, and here we have thoughts popping right off the page, if that isn't an amazing form of movement. And so this card wanted to be associated with this one. We look at its number, we say 2A1A. Remember, our new card always starts with the same card number as the parent card. And then, since this one ended in a number, it was looking for a letter, and the very first letter, A, was available. How did we know that the letter A was available? Well, we looked for a directory card right after this one. And by golly, we found one. Only all of the other references on that directory card were all links to somewhere else in the Zettelkasten. So you can see that this idea of part of the joy of the Zettelkasten is the pop off the page moment of insight actually tied to several other main cards. So it had a hard time deciding where it wanted to go. So since this card already had a directory card, I added our new card to the directory card since it already existed. And now look at the amazing conversation we've got going here about thoughts about how a Zettelkasten functions. It's really, really quite amazing. And these are exciting ideas that we can work with and utilize as we're exploring the world through a Zettelkasten. So to recap, this card chose this card for its parent because they were both about a Zettelkasten and because there was movement in both of them. And then having chose this one, its new card number began with the parent number, added a letter because the last one was a number, and the letter A was available, so it was used. And the tagline from this card gets added to the directory card. Now, normally, if we were just adding an A card, it wouldn't have a directory card. It's only because there were so many links already attached to this card that it already had a directory card. Usually we create a directory card when there are 2 or more child cards. Okay, now let's switch gears and take a look at a comparison to how numbering works if you're following Scott Shepherd's system. I maintain that except for a small wrinkle that we'll discuss in the next video, the numbering system that I use and the numbering system that Scott Shepard uses are virtually equivalent. Let me explain. Scott likes categories, and I use categories too. So when you have a category system, then the category number is drawn from your system of categories that are assigned. And in that system, you generally have a title card to go with your major categories. So anything that varies in the first 4 digits will normally get a title card. In this case, we have the title Right to Freedom. Many of you know that I'm in Scott Shepard's Right to Freedom program. It's really excellent. I have to recommend it. Okay, so one of the things that Scott does in his Right to Freedom program is he walks you through creation of a number of Zettelkasten cards. And so I'm following his exactly when I create my cards from his videos. He'll say, take out a card and give it this number. Well, by the time we get here, we've already covered 5167/1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now this title card is taking us through another section of his program, section 6. Now, what would that card number look like in my system? I also use categories, so I don't have any problem with the category number. And in point of fact, this is the only difference. In this world, the only difference would be I would have a dash where he has a slash. And because I don't need a slash, that means I don't have to make one of these fancy ones that could otherwise be confused with a slash. And because I don't have the fancy one, I don't need the bar on the 7 to distinguish the 1 from the 7. So I think mine is a little simpler. But there you can see that they're virtually identical. In fact, in this section, there are quite a number of cards that are almost exactly identical to mine. Again, the only difference is I have a dash and he has a slash. And so that frees me up to do the simpler numbers, characters, all the way from A through H. But he has some of the cards that don't follow this pattern. In this group of cards, we'll see quite a number of card numbers that look like the more traditional Scott Shepard cards with lots and lots and lots of slashes. Well, let's take a look at some of those and see how I would write those cards. Okay, in my system, this card number would get 5167-6A, A being the first letter of the alphabet. But let's go on because that's quite a simple one. Let's take a look at this one. My numbering would be 5167-6A1. Again, when we get to this card number, it's very simple to translate it into my system. So let's take a more complicated one. Well, this number is about as long as they get in this particular section, and I hope you can see how simple it is to write in my version. The 2 is the second letter of the alphabet, so that gets converted to a B. Actually, completely and exactly the same. So it's really a matter of stylistic choice. If you like seeing the slashes, then just go ahead and add them. If you'd rather see something slightly simpler, go ahead and use my system of numbering. There really isn't any mathematical difference between them. They produce the same sort order, and they produce the same uniqueness of the cards. I hope you enjoyed that exploration of a little bit of the 2 different styles of numbering. Now you'll find that if you follow Victoria Crowder, Zettelkasten for fiction writers, she uses Scott's numbering system. And sometimes she uses ABC like we saw with Scott, and sometimes she uses the / system. Now typically with hers, when she's using ABC, it's because she has a known block of individual items that go in a sequence. So it's pretty clear when she's choosing to use the ABC approach. Now, you know, if you've watched any of Scott's videos, that his numbers can get a little wild. And if you've read his books, chapter 11 in particular, in his quite famous tome, this is a really excellent book, by the way. I don't care too much for chapter 11, which is his how-to, because I think it's overly complex. But other than that chapter, I really recommend this book very highly. It will give you all of the history and the philosophy behind a Zettelkasten that I don't cover at all. I'm not a Zettelkasten historian, nor am I a Zettelkasten philosopher. I just use the Zettelkasten in my work on character traits, and I've gotten pulled into teaching Zettelkasten just because of my boxes sitting behind me when I've taught about the character traits, which is my real love. Now, I love the Zettelkasten so much as a tool that I'm happy to teach it as well. But my true passion is the character traits. Now, what I will cover in an extra video tomorrow, where we're talking a little bit about the philosophy of organizing a Zettelkasten, I will show you how Scott's numbers occasionally get pretty weird and what I do to avoid that weirdness. So come on back tomorrow if you're interested in that one. The next one is going to be a little bit more on the technical side, so I'll warn you again when the video starts. If you want the more practical, direct stuff, this next one might not be quite as interesting to you. But I will let you know at the start of that video as a reminder that this one is kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So come on back tomorrow if you'd like to know a little bit more about how to operate things if you wanted to do them all the way Scott's way. Like, how do those weird numbers come from? How can you make those weird numbers work for you if you want to follow Scott? And Scott's a fine guru. He's my guru too. So I'm delighted to be able to elucidate his system a little more for people who, want to go the Shepherd-Lumen method. Come on back tomorrow for that if you're interested. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.